It started with the calls. The 911 logs for that week showed 5 separate reports from different people on the same street. Each described hearing what they thought were human screams, short, sharp bursts, like someone shouting into a pillow. All of them traced the sound to the same address, 214 Auburn Lane. On paper, the house had been vacant for 12 years. The utilities were cut, the mailbox sealed, and the yard left to grow wild. A foreclosure notice was stapled to the front door in 2013 and never taken down. Yet the neighbors swore they'd heard something. Some claimed the noises came at night, others in the early morning. One woman said she heard them at exactly 3:17 a.m., as if on a schedule. Detective Harris didn't like houses like this. They were too easy to get lost in, too easy for things to hide. The property had the same look as 100 others he'd been called to: peeling paint, sagging porch blinds that never moved. But as he stood in the driveway, he noticed something different. All the windows were intact, but none reflected the sunlight properly. The glass was flat, almost dull, like it had been treated. He knocked once, twice. No answer. The neighbors watched from behind their curtains. Harris tried the handle. Locked. He circled the building, peering into a gap in the blinds, and saw only darkness. Not shadow, but pure black, as if the room beyond had no light to give back at all. When he finally got the warrant and pushed the door open, the air hit him first, warm, stale, heavy, with a faint chemical tang. The floor creaked under his boots, but the sound seemed swallowed before it could echo. The living room looked stripped bare. No furniture, no dust, no smell of decay. Just 4 walls that seemed too thick for a suburban house. Then he saw it. The walls weren't drywall. Beneath a thin layer of paint, there was dense, foam-like material, cut and fitted with industrial precision. Harris pressed his palm against it and felt its strange give. It was the same kind of insulation used in recording studios. From somewhere deeper in the house came a faint, muffled sound. Not quite a scream, more like someone breathing hard through clenched teeth. The sound stopped the moment Harris moved toward it. He stood in the narrow hallway, breathing slow, listening. The air felt denser here, pressing in around him. His flashlight beam slid over the walls, the same foam insulation under the paint, the same strange absence of echo. Even his own footsteps seemed clipped short, as if the house was swallowing them whole. The floor plan didn't match what he'd seen in the county records. The official blueprint showed a straight hallway ending in the kitchen. Here, the corridor bent sharply left into a section that shouldn't exist. He followed it, running his hand along the wall. At the turn, he found a door with no handle, just a flat white surface. It wasn't locked, there was nothing to lock, it was sealed. The edges had been caulked over, painted to match the wall. Someone had gone to great effort to make it look like part of the structure. But from the faint, uneven bulge in the paint, Harris could tell it was thin plywood underneath. He marked it mentally and kept moving. The kitchen was stripped bare. No stove, no fridge, just a scarred floor and cabinets with their hinges removed. But there was something wrong with the back wall. The light from his flashlight didn't reflect properly off it. He pressed his palm to the surface and realized it wasn't cold like drywall. It was warm. Harris stepped back, scanning the corners. That was when he noticed the small, perfectly circular holes near the floor, each no wider than a pen. They ran along the wall in a neat, even row. He crouched down to peer through one, but saw nothing. Not darkness, nothing. Like looking into an empty void. A sudden metallic click echoed faintly through the floorboards. He froze, scanning the shadows. It came again, measured, steady, like a latch being turned somewhere beneath him. The basement. He found the door in the laundry room, half hidden behind a panel of warped wood. The lock had been replaced with a heavy steel padlock, new and out of place in a house like this. He tested the weight of it, solid. He'd need to cut it. As he stood there, debating whether to call for backup, a faint vibration moved through the floor. It wasn't footsteps. It was too steady, more like a machine, humming somewhere deep under the house. When he leaned closer to the locked basement door, he realized the hum wasn't mechanical at all. It was a voice, a low, continuous murmur too deep and fast to understand, and it was speaking without pause, like it had been going long before he arrived. Harris came back the next day with bolt cutters. The street was empty, just like before. No one ever seemed to pass this house. The padlock snapped easily, falling to the floor with a dull thud that barely echoed. The sound was swallowed instantly, as if the air drank it in. The basement stairs were steep and unfinished, the boards warped with age. The smell hit him halfway down, stale sweat, metal, and something sweet that didn't belong. At the bottom, he found the source of the hum. The walls weren't brick or cinder block. They were layers of soundproof panels, bolted together, leaving no gaps. Thick cables ran across the ceiling into a cluster of recording equipment stacked on a metal table. Every piece was switched on, recording in complete silence. Or so it seemed. Harris pressed one of the headphones to his ear. Silence. Then a whisper. A rapid, breathless stream of words, like someone repeating a confession over and over. The voice was hoarse, worn thin, and it never stopped. In the far corner, a single chair sat bolted to the floor. Heavy straps dangled from its arms and legs. Beside it, a microphone was suspended from the ceiling, positioned perfectly for someone to speak without moving their head. On the table next to the chair, dozens of USB drives were neatly labeled with dates. The most recent one was marked with yesterday's date. Harris picked it up and froze. The label didn't just have a date, it had a name. His name. From upstairs came the unmistakable sound of the front door closing. The footage was useless. 6 people had boarded bus 41 between the depot and Mile Creek Junction. The time stamp confirmed it, 21:14 to 21:32. The onboard camera showed them entering one by one, a man in a work jacket, a young woman clutching a paper bag, 3 middle-aged commuters, and an older man with a cane. The driver, Mason Bell, had made no unscheduled stops. The GPS route was clean. The bus arrived at the terminal at 22:03, with Mason alone in the driver's seat. Every passenger had vanished. Detective Sloan replayed the video for the 5th time. No one exited. The side and rear doors never opened between stops. The time stamp ticked forward, passengers in view, until, frame by frame, each seat simply emptied. Not instantly, but as if the people had subtly shifted out of frame, replaced by nothing. In one case, the young woman's paper bag sat in the seat long after she was gone. There was no footage missing, no camera malfunctions. Mason's statement was worse. He could list the fares, the route, even recall the smell of someone's takeout. But when asked about the passengers themselves, his answers grew halting. By the fourth question, he was staring at the table, breathing shallow, saying only, "I don't think they were talking to me." The report was marked as an active anomaly, the department's term for things that didn't add up, but had no place in any official manual. Sloan requested access to the onboard audio recordings. If there was anything the camera didn't catch, maybe the microphones had. The audio from Bus 41 came in two channels, driver's mic and cabin feed. The driver's mic was clean, Mason humming off-key, the low rumble of the road, the metallic pop of the ticket dispenser. Ordinary. The cabin feed was different. At first, it matched what Sloan expected. The hiss of the engine, a faint cough, someone shifting in their seat. Then, at timestamp 21:24, the tone changed. It wasn't a sound exactly, but a muffling, like the air itself had thickened. The passengers' movements slowed in the audio, not in speed but in texture, as though their clothes no longer rustled, and their breathing came from further away than the mic could reach. One by one, those traces dropped out. At 21:27, the older man's cane made its last dull tap on the floor. At 21:29, the paper bag gave a faint crinkle, and then nothing from that seat again. By 21:31, the only sound left in the cabin was the engine and something else, an intermittent knock, like fingertips brushing the bus walls from the outside. The pattern was irregular, shifting in location, sometimes by the window, sometimes lower by the wheel wells. Sloan replayed it with noise reduction. Beneath the knocks, something emerged. Not a voice, not words, but the kind of low, deliberate vibration that could almost be mistaken for a voice if you wanted it to be. It was so faint she had to lean in close, until she realized her own pulse had started matching its rhythm. The last knock came at 21 hours 32 minutes and 14 seconds, just 3 seconds before the cabin went completely silent. When the bus pulled into the terminal, the seats were empty, but the paper bag was still there. Inside, a plastic container of soup, still warm. Sloan didn't ask permission to take the night shift. By the time dispatch noticed the swap, she was already behind the wheel of a station sedan, retracing Bus 41's route from the terminal to the last stop before it went missing. The road was nearly empty, just sodium streetlights flickering over wet pavement, casting long skeletal shadows across the shoulder. She kept the GPS running, matching the timestamps from the audio to her location. At 21:27, the cane's last tap, she passed a warped section of guardrail, bent outward as though something had pressed from inside the road toward the trees. The paint was scraped away, but not by metal. The surface was scuffed in tall, vertical strokes, almost like fingernails. At 21:29, the bag's last crinkle. She saw them. Damp shoe prints leading off the asphalt and into the ditch. They weren't muddied by rain. They stopped abruptly halfway down the embankment, as though the wearers had simply stopped existing. At 21:31, the first knock in the audio, she felt it. Through the sedan's floor, faint but distinct, a hollow tap, perfectly timed with what she'd heard in the recording. It wasn't coming from the road surface. It was underneath. Her headlights caught something ahead, a dark smear on the tarmac. She pulled over and stepped out, the night air colder than it had any right to be. The smear wasn't oil or blood. It was damp like condensation and warm to the touch. From the trees came a slow vibration, so low it was almost inaudible. She realized it matched the same pulse that had bled through the cabin feed. Something was still following the route. She left the sedan idling, got back inside, and drove without looking in the mirrors, because in her peripheral vision, she could see rows of silhouettes in the back seat that hadn't been there when she started.